Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to InStudio presented by Cola today. We are very privileged to have Stephen Falcke, who's obviously very well renowned, with us this afternoon. He's going to be talking on iconic rooms, styles, and decorators from past to present, and I'm sure we're all very excited to hear what he has to say. Stephen, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, how nice it is to be here. My association with Decorex, maybe I can't move around. My association with Decorex has been 22 years. I've been the patron, and I've had so many wonderful years I traveled and I've been very privileged. Can everyone hear? I've been very privileged to work all over the seas for 35 years, but every year I try and bring something that I've seen, and they give me a stand, and it's really been wonderful. I've done many talks over the years, but I thought this year what I'm going to do is talk about iconic designers. And they are people, there are many wonderful designers, but they are people that have actually crossed my path. And I've come into, some way or other, I've come into sort of contact with them. And there's a lot to say, so I'm going to kind of start off. But the first designer that I'm going to talk about is David Hicks. And I'm sure a lot of people know David Hicks. I was very privileged to work for him. What happened in my career, I did the army, and then I decided I wanted to, there wasn't much about interior design in this country, so I decided to go and study abroad. And I went to the Chelsea Art School. And at the Chelsea Art School, we have an exhibition at the end of the year. And David Hicks had come around, he'd been looking for someone for 3 years, and he said, you know, this is the guy I wanted. Unfortunately, I went to work for him, and it was absolutely wonderful. I had work permit problems. But I'll start off with him. He's an iconic designer and a man that really broke grounds and did amazing things in his time, and very much today, all the geometrics he was really responsible for. So that is a picture of David Hicks in Albany, which was the first block of flats in London, and that's where he lived. What he was famous for was all grouping of wonderful things together. What was dynamic was it didn't have to have value. Things didn't have to be expensive. He mixed an old piece of stone with something he inherited, but he had a wonderful grouping of things. And he made sheeting famous. So there's his geometrics, which you see on sheeting, as well as he made the bed. The bed became a very important factor. This is an apartment that I went to, and I've got a few funny stories. What was interesting, working for him, I was very much a student, and he was connected to the royal family. His wife was Lord Mountbatten's daughter. So Lord Mountbatten and Prince Charles, so we did, in my days, get very much involved. But I remember he had finished this apartment, and we were getting ready for the Queen to come, and Queen Elizabeth, and we had some really interesting moments. Maybe I'll come on and tell you the stories, but I'll just show you. He was very, very famous for doing neoclassic things. Look at the old swan chair mixed with a very clean line. This was all done 30 years ago. So if you have a look at that, there's tremendous style, and you know, it's contemporary. Again, this was a sale he had at his house, and I was very lucky because he moved from a big house, Britwell House, to a smaller on the same property, and this was the sale he had that hit record sort of sums. This was the shop I worked in, and it was a wonderful shop in Jermyn Street, which is very famous for men's shirting, for shoemakers, but he had the shop, and that was, if you look at it, it's actually H logos. It's done with flooring and matting, but that was about 25 years ago. He was also very famous for the bath. He said you take a bathroom doesn't have to be a little room where you actually bath. But take a room, if you've got an extra room, and put the bath in the middle. And bathing is a wonderful ritual. So he made kind of a room, a bathroom, which was very extravagant and really great. You can see his geometric fabrics. This was the shop 30 years ago. And if you look at those clashing colors, people either loved it or hated it. But what was wonderful, these clashing colors, when you look at pink and orange and red and things that you would never have put together, this is what the shop was like when I worked for him. Again, you know, taking a French chair and putting something modern on it. And they were really very exciting things. Again, the geometric, and again, famous for his tester bed. That's a canopy bed. But what was interesting with the tester bed, in the early days, the tester bed was invented to keep people warm. They didn't have heating, so they actually closed the curtains to keep you warm, but it became such a sort of fashionable thing to use. These, again, are wonderful groupings of modern art with old things that he was famous for, his use of fantastic gutsy colors. This was a house that he did in the Algarve, and they were clients that I was very much a junior working with. But he was the architect, the landscape gardener, and the interior designer. So it was a very, sorry, am I in your way? If you move. And this was very much, and he was responsible for neoclassicism. He was responsible for all the things that very much we use today. It was just, again, the architecture. Again, this was his bedroom in the house. He was very friendly, but, you know, his old William Morris and the bath at the bottom of the bed. And they were things that were avant-garde, but they actually made sense. This was the last apartment. He lived in the Albany, and that was the first block of flats in the world, in England. And it was very famous. 5 prime ministers lived in the Albany. And that was the last I worked with him on that was just before he died. This was all part of the original, the last of the Albany. That was his kitchen. And he actually mixed things that were really very interesting. But what he did, I remember going with him to the British Museum, and they were just plaster molds that they sold. And behind that was the fridge and the kind of cups and whatever. And he said, you know, who wants to see an ugly kitchen? So everything was behind the cupboards. Again, his wonderful grouping of things, mixing something old, mixing something new. That was the original Albany. When David Hicks phoned me up, and he didn't phone me, he contacted, we didn't have cell phones in those days, and he said, look, I've looked for someone and I want you to look at employing you. And he said, fine, and I was totally flattered. And he said, I had to design an entrance hall in this apartment. This is the previous one to the one I've just shown you. And he said, fine, and there I was, and I had to kind of do this design. He said, well, you think you haven't got the job yet, you've got to physically do it. So there I was thinking I was a big deal doing a drawing, but I physically had to get involved with wallpapering and kind of doing all the things that I had no skill in yet. That again was the old bedroom, but again, that wonderful shiny chintz and things that were traditionally English, but with a wonderful, wonderful twist. The next person I'm going to talk about is a very famous designer called David Collins. And he was responsible, I think there was no one in the world quite like him for retail. If you look at the incredible restaurants, the Berkeley in London, if you look at Fortnum and Mason, he was a master. And funny enough, we never met. He stayed in my apartment, and he used to he loved Cape Town. And I have an apartment in Cape Town, and he used to stay there, and unfortunately, he died of skin cancer. Last year, and he was the most remarkable designer, but we spoke on the phone many, many times. But unfortunately, we planned to meet in London, and over all the years, we never really met. He used to arrive at my apartment and phone me, and I was always busy or traveling. So David Collins, what is incredible is his uniqueness about retail. He did shops, he did hotels. If you look at the detail, again, that he did, and everything was designed. He used nothing that was off the shelf. Every single detail was really quite incredible. I mean, if you look at the scale of how he worked, look at the carpet, the chairs were made, every single thing, look at the bar. No one could detail like David Collins. And I must say, every time I still go and see some of, even the ice cream parlor at Fortnum and Mason, I sat there and I just couldn't believe the detail, the color, and it kind of is invigorating. That again, you know, very much Art Deco. That's in the Berkeley Hotel, but a bathroom. And he was really, took everything sort of to the limit. That was, you know, that actually was a restaurant that I have been to as well that he did. And that's very much Art Deco. Everyone is doing that now. Everyone, I was working in Belgium a few days ago. Literally, I came back yesterday. And I went to quite a few of the furniture, and everyone is doing retro. Everything is kind of what we used to throw out. It shows how old I am. What we used to throw out is all coming back. What my granny and auntie had is really what it's all about today. I mean, antiques. When I started working in London, antiques every second shop was an antique shop. Today, they're all restaurants, and there are so few and far between. I think there has to be a total reverse back to, you know, wonderful antiques, because there's always a place for something good. Again, this is the Berkeley, which was an old bank. I think it was an old Barclays bank that he turned into a restaurant. But he just had a wonderful way, and guts. Look at the columns. He just put patterns onto the floors. He did the most wonderful, wonderful things. He did domestic applications, but you know, this is one of, I think, a hotel suite he did. That's the London Hotel in New York, which is on Broadway, and I've actually stayed there, and it really is special. The next person I'm going to talk to you about is Christian Liagra. Christian Liagra is most probably he's a French designer, most probably one of the most famous designers living today. He must be the most copied designer in the world. Absolutely. If one looks it up, he has the most wonderful shops in Paris, in Rue de Bac, and wonderful, he's opened a new shop in London. But what is amazing about Christian Liagra, everything is of such wonderful taste. I've been in the business now for 36 years, and what I decided to do 5 years ago is to do a book. And I thought, listen, you know, it's now or never. And so I've been very lucky. Many people who would never allow one into their houses have all wanted to be in the book. And it's taken me 5 years. And when I kind of look at one of the apartments I did was furnished, I did the interior, but using Christian Liagra. I must say, it is fantastic, because if you go into his shop, there's not a thing that isn't good. There isn't a thing that you can't put your own personality. It is so simple. It is so good. It is so clean. Unfortunately, it's so expensive. That's why everyone tries to copy it. And not only that, but I think the thing is that, you know, when you place a delivery, you sort of put your deposit down, and you keep on, we waited a year. And he keeps on saying, well, Mr. Liagra is not quite happy with the quality. And, you know, what can you say? You know, I've paid my money up front. But he is amazing. So these are very much interiors of what he does. And, you know, you can bring, they're simple. They kind of dateless designs. Very, very modern. And, you know, isn't that wonderful? It's just a basin on a pedestal. It's really quite incredible, but the clean lines that you can use, mix any style with any color, any fabric. Those are just some of the details. That's a yacht he's done, but you know, you don't need a scatter cushion, you don't need to decorate, but you don't want to block the clean, wonderful lines. So I must say, you know, he does such unbelievably, isn't that wonderful, with a winking eye as a piece of artwork. You know, it's just all magical. That again is some of the things he's done. That's a bed. I think that's a job in Bali. He's brought 3 books out. But again, an old chair mixed with something. There is, I've been to a house in Cape Town that he was brought out to do for an Oriental lady, but it really is, it's kind of dateless. There again are his simple, clean lines he's designed, and the world copies it because it is so copyable. But the quality of his work is just unbelievable. The next person I'm going to talk about is a guy called Geoffrey Burleson, who is a famous, when I was studying at college, we had to try and, there was different designers and different suppliers allowed us to go in shadow, students to go in shadow. And what was interesting is that we had to pull names out of a hat. And I was at the Chelsea Art School, and out of the hat was pulled Geoffrey Burleson. And I went and shadowed with him, and he was this amazing man, this chubby, the right one to talk, chubby, sort of comfortable, kind of lovely guy with sort of red hair and freckles. And what he was famous about, he was famous with fabrics. And he did the famous florals that were faded. We used to say tea-stained. But what was incredible about everything looked old. And when I went with him on a weekend buying, and as I say, I was a little boy taking notes in my kind of book, but he took me to a market, and he started working for the most famous people in England and France, the famous Rothschild family, because he had a way of mixing things and things that didn't match, and pattern on pattern, which I'll show you. But these are his florals that were, they always say tea-stained. Over many years, he was a fabrics man, but over many years, these wonderful florals that were easy on the eye. And that's where he kind of did grand things, where he mixed everything, pattern on pattern on pattern. And when I went with him on the weekend, and we had to go to all these antique markets and antique shop, and then we didn't have photographs. He kind of, did little sketches in his book and asked me to sketch, and I felt quite embarrassed to say I could even draw when he did these quick sketches. And then on Monday morning, he used to phone his clients up and say, "Darling, bring your purse." And that was mean, bring your money and I'll show you what I bought you. So these are very much wonderful. That was his own place in Bath, which was a modern contemporary thing, but he mixed old fabrics and old things and old screens and put them together in a magical, magical way. That was also his, and those are Suzanis, which are so fashionable now. But again, this was 25 years ago. They're from Uzbekistan, and they really are quite wonderful. They are mixing of kilams and things, again, that didn't always have value. That's his famous tea-stained fabric, which is on the walls and on the bed. The English, and he mixed French furniture and did wonderful, wonderful things. That, again, was his faded. You see, chintzes were the biggest thing, but if you look at the way they faded, and he used a wonderful base cloth. The cloth that he printed on was wonderful because you could upholster in it, and it's lasted for years and years. I know people who've used his fabrics 20 years ago. Unfortunately, he had this incredible shop in King's Road, which was a sort of hubbub of English interior design. And he crossed the road and was knocked over by a car. And he left his fabric house, which is Burleson Fabrics, to one of his friends, and his antique business, he split the business to another Hotzel Mackenzie, who still, copy these fabrics. But that's just showing his wonderful, rich, nothing matches, nothing goes, but it's all so easy on the eye. Again, a typically English bed, and he put wonderful fabrics onto the walls, and they just were wonderful. Now, the last person I'm going to talk about is a very special lady called Anushka Hempel. And she's married to a South African, and she has a famous hotel called Blake's in London. And she does incredible things. She said to me, "Stephen, I only buy things in 36s. And then I'll show you some of her work and why she says that. Again, she's made the bed famous. She has a hotel. If anyone's in London, it's called Blake's Hotel. And it's an incredible hotel. It's painted black. They're still suing her for the color, but she sort of doesn't mind. She puts the most incredible. She uses stripes like no one can. It's quite claustrophobic, but as you see, many people are doing beds, calling the tester beds. But in Blake's Hotel, every room is different. So this is her own house. And she's so fanatical. I remember going there, and her husband said to me, please sit down, Stephen. There's 100 chairs, but nowhere to sit. And basically, she styles everything up so beautifully with cushions, and it looks so seductive and wonderful, but it's not that practical. I remember staying at Blake's Hotel, and it was quite wonderful because everything was, I don't know how the housekeeping managed and how they unpack and put things together. It's quite incredible. But, the television was under the tablecloth. And kind of, hang on, I mean, you've got to spend 15 minutes finding everything. But they were kind of fantasies. And a friend of mine's son ended up working for her, and she had this unbelievable energy. And she used to wake him up at 3 o'clock and say, take the dogs to the country, I'm on my way, And she went into couture, into fashion, and she really has done remarkable things. She uses brown, and again, the bedroom is a major, major thing. That again, I don't know how you sit at the table, and I don't know how unless you just talk to the person next to you, but they're wonderful. It's worth just going there to see the decoration. And what she's done, she opened a hotel, and she loves mixing Eastern things with Western things. And she had a wonderful restaurant called Thai, Italian and Thai mixed. And so many of her things are kind of English. She's never forgot that real English kind of feel, but mixing Oriental things. I was once on a boat, and she has a boat called Beluga, and she has 2 boats. They're old Turkish boats, and she rents them out. And they are so styled and so wonderful. And a friend of mine chartered one. A friend of mine's friend chartered one. And she said, you couldn't even move because everything, they had these little guys who were styling and puffing up cushions and lining everything up. She said she just wanted to run and be free at the end. But what was interesting is that when I was it was in Corsica, we watched, and there were these amazingly dressed Oriental guys, and they were carrying, shopping. But what was incredible, they had these Louis Vuitton trunks, and they were walking, and I just thought, that must be Anushka Hempel's boat. And we kind of went round and we followed them, and it was. And even the way she had trained her staff, she really is quite wonderful. Those, again, are her Chinese screens. It's very cluttered, very overdone, but very, very magical. She then went contemporary, and that's the hotel that she didn't. I remember going there, and it was called Blake's. It was called the Hempel. Blake's is her other hotel. And then she just got, behind those screens, she just got wonderful fashion models. And the silhouette, you can see 3 on each side. She really has a wonderful, she lives in a fantasy world. She told me once when she had to sort of wear contact lenses, she said, she hated it because she saw the world through rose-tinted, eyes. And she said when she saw everything too clearly, it wasn't as nice. That again, when I say she did wonderful stripes, no one could manipulate the stripe, turn it around, put it on the wall, put it on the floor, and create the magic like she could. This is one of her suites in the hotel. Funny enough, I was doing a job, and the client put us up in, and that had wonderful red lacquered walls. It was a real jewel box. This is her white suite in Blake's Hotel, and it's mixed of Indian things and inlay. But it was the most sort of sought-after bridal honeymoon suite, which that's, again, her beds and her drapes, and they're totally over the top. But really, why not move into a bit of magic for a short while? Those are just some of the details. And when she bought things in 36s, you can see what she did with topiary. There were groups. There was nothing, just one of everything. And that was a garden that was so magical. In this house, there's a room that I showed that is all sort of black and green. And what she did, she told me that the floors were marble, and they had little veins. She got a dentist drill, and she got them to drill out all the colored veins and then sort of mix the marble dust of the dark marble and fill it in, so there were no actual natural veins. Again, using her stripes in such a magical way. Well, guys, that's just showing you some of the iconic designers that have crossed my way. But I'm sure there are great designers amongst you, but I think what the magic, and I must say, I have had, so many years of the most wonderful life. I have traveled the world. I'm still traveling. I think I need to stop. But what I do is I kind of absorb things and try and just see what is going on in the world and try and share it with people here. And I have to tell you, we do magical things here, and there's unbelievable talent. And, I was on the airplane the other day, and I spoke to an Australian guy, and he said to me, he's in homewares. He said, we used to travel the world, but now we come to South Africa because they are doing such wonderful things. And even with the rate of exchange, which is so against us, there are such wonderful talent in this town and such wonderful things. And I say to anyone who's in the decorating world, it's a world, I get so excited, and I can carry on talking. And there are many, many more designers that I could talk about who have kind of influenced or I've learned things. I always say to designers, you're as good as your last job. Never be blasé. Never think you've got this client or you've got that job. Give it of your best. Think. Make rules and break rules, and you'll never look back. Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Our world. We love it openly. We love it boldly.
Oh, right, yes.
It's rich
Yes,
with
that's
history.
right, yes.
And what lies ahead is filled with brilliant promise.
Yeah, you can get some
It's
of
our
it.
unique way
You know
of
what's
looking at things,
interesting? They said to
with
me
both
that,
distinct
that
perspective
she said, that
and gracious
funny-
manner.
that funny show with the
It's
two
living by
ladies,
our credo that our
English
design
blonde
forward
woman.
thinking should have impact,
Those two
not just
characters,
aesthetically, but environmentally.
they
That
actually
power
had
is intense
in
and
their
essential
fault.
to our
It's
basic
not very
needs.
good as really happened.
That hospitality is a shareable form of art, and that the space we live in is vital
Yeah.
because it's also the space we
You
love
can
in.
look, that high
That
pocket
everything we see, touch, taste is inspired by art and the artists who live beyond conventional limits. Our world. We are its curators, its bold pioneers, its most passionate caretakers. That it's our people and our products that ultimately result in our pride and our purpose.
Definitely looking better than when I last saw you.
Yeah, it was diabetes and all that, yeah. I'm fine, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Well,
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Thank you.